Welcome to my channel people. Author link will be on description, make sure to check it out. Get ready, the devils are soon going to make their move. Yelled Kuroinu at the top of his lungs as various dogs of all kinds of breeds started coming out of their houses and faced the gate of hell that had an eerie red aura accumulating on it, suggesting the incoming wave of devils. And just as the dark night completely covered the sky, leaving only the moon to shine its light upon the world, devils slowly started leaving the portal one after the other, starting with the weakest kind, devil beasts. The power of these beasts ranged between elite Chunin level and Jonin level, and they kept coming out one after the other, which brought a frown to Kuroinu's face as he quickly ordered, "Get ready, today's wave is bigger than usual, so these are devil beasts huh?" muttered Bakurio as he thought, "This is a good chance for me to accumulate some souls and evolve Yomi no Kuni. But let test them first." Then, Bakurio rushed in front of the dogs, surprising them as he attacked a devil beast that was at the Jonin level. "Rasengan," muttered Bakurio, and the famous Rasengan soon formed on his hand, and he easily dodged the sharp and fast claw of a lizard-like devil beast with dark scales oozing a dark poisonous smoke, and it was at least 5 meters high. Bakurio plunged the Rasengan right on his head. That was easy, he thought as the beast screamed in agony. Woo! But Bakurio soon noticed that his Rasengan actually didn't finish it off, and he couldn't help but frown slightly while dodging its next attack before he began accumulating lighting inside his hand that soon caused a terrifying sound like 1,000 birds chirping at the same time. It was the Chidori. And he immediately plunged it at the beast's slightly dented scales from the Rasengan, but he was in for another surprise, as even this was barely enough to penetrate the beast's defense and plunge into its brain. What the hell? This defense is beyond normal, thought Bakurio before he noticed a red stream was leaving the Hell's Gate and gushing into the lizard's injury and started healing it at a terrifying speed. They can actually sustain this much damage without dying. I guess these beasts aren't using their brains in the first place. And what's this red energy? Observed Bakurio before he heard Shiroinu's gentle voice in his ear. Bakurio-kun, those beasts can only be killed by completely destroying both their heads and hearts. Otherwise they will keep regenerating. I see, this makes them truly annoying to face, especially with the addition of their huge durability. Responded Bakurio before he used his appraisal ability on a monkey-looking beast while using another Chidori to finish off the current one he was fighting by stating it in the heart before its brain could recover. Low Devil Monkey Level 60, Elite Monster. Attributes: STR 560, Agi 300, Phi 600, Bit 700, Sta 3000, Speed 2000, Skills: Hell's Punch, Roar, Devil's Physique, Life Drain, Medium Genjutsu Immunity, Tainted Regeneration. Description: this is a monkey beast that was tainted by the negative powers of hell and transformed into a devilish creature with a terrifying body. After reading this, Bakurio's eyes flickered slightly and he read the description of the skills. Of course, all of this was happening in less than an instant thanks to his inhuman reaction speed. Hell's Punch. Gather chakra and hell's energy in the hand before punching, resulting in a destructive attack. Roar. Accumulates chakra and hell's energy inside the chest before roaring, which creates a terrifying shockwave. Lesser Devil's Physique. Increase the defense of the body by 50%. Life Drain. Consuming non-devil beings allows it to restore its health. Medium Genjutsu Immunity. Can resist any genjutsu below a rank. Tainted Regeneration. Passively heal from any injury as long as there's hell's energy. Stops working if both the heart and brain are destroyed. Bakurio's jaw almost fell to the floor after seeing the attributes and skills of this beast that was supposed to be only at Jonin level. As if feeling Bakurio staring at him, the devil monkey rushed at him and used the Hell's Punch, trying to smash him apart, but Bakurio easily dodged it and kicked it away with all his strength. Although it was as if he was tickling it, because thanks to its huge physical attribute and demon's physique, it didn't feel anything at all and instead attacked Bakurio with even more power than before. TCH, I need at least an A-rank's jutsu to damage it, thought Bakurio as he observed the situation around him and noticed that the dogs were fighting in groups against these monsters while Kakashi was fighting a Jonin level 1 on his own. Why are these monsters still exiting the gate? Shiroinu said that the biggest number they ever fought was only 50 devils, yet we are already at 55 and they are still leaving the gate. If this goes on, the situation might turn dangerous for these dogs, thought Bakurio, and decided to quickly get rid of as many devils as he could, and the two elder sage dogs seemed to have thought of the same thing and they were about to act. However, before they could, devil demi-beasts started leaving the portal mixed with the devil beasts, and Bakurio immediately noticed that these abominations were at the strength of Jonin and Elite Jonin, but considering how strong the Jonin version was, he couldn't even begin to imagine how strong these one were going to be. Impossible, how could so many beasts leave the gate at the same time? This is bad, thought Kuroinu, but his shock was only starting as he noticed a few humanoid-looking devils, and his heart immediately sunk. These things were at least of elite Jonin level and most of them were at the low cage level. This fight was no longer possible to win without casualties. However, his face soon turned into despair when he noticed that not one but 3 completely humanoid devils left the portal, and the scar on Kuroinu's face couldn't help but ache when he stared at one with short gray hair and a sword on his hips. Quick! Activate the formation of purification, commanded Kuroinu, and instantly, Shiroinu moved into action along with others and a formation soon was triggered, shining with a white light, and started purifying Hell's energy, which in turn greatly hindered the devil's regeneration. The dog fought these devils for ages, they of course have some countermeasure for their abilities. Meanwhile, inside the chaos, Bakurio noticed that one of the devils with snake-like eyes was staring at him out of everybody before he whispered something to the man to his right that was wearing a scholar's hat and clothing and had a short black beard. Then, he turned his attention to somewhere inside the Osor mountain range and his horn started shining with a terrifying black lighting that he quickly lunged at the distance with a sick smile on his face. Surprisingly, he was aiming at the location where the young cubs were living and his attack was at the level of a tailed beast bomb. However, just as the lightning left from its horn, it was blocked by a terrifying tornado that was created by a huge beast-like roar that made the mountains tremble before a 3-headed dog appeared in front of Uwabami with all of its 6 pairs of eyes glaring at Bim. "We meet again, Hound Sage," said Uwabami with a devilish smile, and the Hound Sage calmly responded to him, "You vermin shouldn't have appeared in front of me," and instantly a terrifying battle started between the two of them. Meanwhile, Bakurio suddenly dodged to his left as the path he was standing on turned into terrifying black ice, and an unlucky low devil beast that was caught in it soon transformed into nothingness. This is at least at the A+ rank and it's just a casual attack from this guy, thought Bakurio as he shot the scholar-looking man that was holding a staff in his hand, a cold look, and his eyes narrowed slightly when he couldn't read his attributes through his appraisal ability. This guy is at least high cage level. Interesting, thought Bakurio as a terrifying smile appeared on his face as his killing intent gushed from his body and said, "Don't die too fast." The scholarly man completely ignored Bakurio as he was unaffected by his aura and simply said, "What a waste of my time." Burn! Hell flame. A raging blue flame rushed at Bakurio like a deadly tsunami, threatening to erase him from existence. This was the power that tempted many people to go to hell. Hell's flame, huh? It seems like a mixture of Hell's energy and fire chakra. Interesting, thought Bakurio before he quickly did some hand signs and created an enormous rock wall to block the flames. But the result was out of his expectations as the rock wall melted without any resistance and the flames kept rushing at him with an unstoppable momentum. The guy fighting the newly arriving Hound Sage is using a weird hell-infused lighting to fight, while the other is using hell-infused wind along with the sword to deal with Kuroinu and Shiroinu, and now this guy can use both Hell's Ice and Hell's Fire. This is going to be troublesome if I don't use my Mangekyo Sharingan, thought Bakurio before his body ignited with a white flame-like aura. This was his skill-burning aura, and with it being level 100. It increases all of his attributes by 35% at the consumption of 50 stamina per second. Feeling the power rushing through his veins, Bakurio then opened the 5 gates at the same time, which further increased his strength and speed by 200%, but unlike Guy, his body can handle it. Although it was also eating quickly at his stamina and burning at least 100 stamina per second. I have 30,000 stamina, I can keep this power up for 200 seconds. It should be enough to deal with this guy, thought Bakurio before he took out his legendary sword and rushed at the weird devil floating in the air at a terrifying speed while slashing his Hell's Flame in two just by the sheer air pressure created from his slash that was about to connect with the scholar guy's head. But to Bakurio's surprise, his enemy still appeared calm and collected as Bakurio's sword connected with a black substance that covered his body and mitigated a huge part of his attack. However, the calm look on the man's face soon turned into shock as Bakurio's slash cut through the black substance covering his body and created a huge gash that revealed even his bones. Plus 300% to damage when using the sword is indeed no joke, thought Bakurio, recalling the functions of his legendary sword while the scholar man made some distance between them with a frown on his face as he stared at his wound and muttered, "You actually injured me. How surprising. That sword of yours is quite special. My friend Hokusai would be quite interested in getting it." Bakurio felt his spine tingling and he noticed the guy fighting Kuroinu and Shiroinu staring at him with a cold look before he turned his attention to his fight and deflected Kuroinu's attack. "You don't seem worried about getting chopped up," said Bakurio, and the man gently shook his head before a dark substance covered every inch of his skin. This was Hell's Earth. Then he created an armor made of Hell's Ice as well that protected his body. On top of that, before he created a cubic barrier around him and left only a small part of his front exposed. "Now you can't do anything while I can keep attacking you however I want," said the scholar guy before he attacked Bakurio again, who had a frown on his face. "This is indeed annoying. The power of his spells is similar to my level 1 sharp transformation. It's unfortunate that I can't use Sage Transformation along with the 8th Gate's Jutsu since my chakra is already rampaging throughout my body and it's almost impossible to control TCH. Thought Bakurio, who didn't want to expose his sharp transformation, so he decided to brute force his way out of this. "Fine. I will see how many times you can resist getting chopped," muttered Bakurio as he easily dodged the Hell Flame and a few Hell Ice spears sent his way before he used his level 60 Swift Sword style that increased his attack speed with the sword by 300% and instantly slashed countless times at all the barriers and any attacks the scholar used. "This is impossible," thought the scholar as he found himself about to get chopped up and was only saved by black lightning sent by Uebami that made Bakurio retreat since he couldn't deflect it with his sword. "No bad brat," said Uebami. "Shu, you better go all out or I will kill you myself." The look on Uebami sent a chill down Shu's spine as he nodded and suddenly roared and transformed into a 3-meter-tall humanoid lion with a muscular build. "Human, you should be proud of forcing me to use my true strength. Hell's Fiend mode," yelled Shu. His orange lion fur turned completely dark and a dark armor naturally formed over his body with blue flames ignited from his hair and a red aura swirling around his body. "No, this is way stronger than a high cage. This is already at super cage level. How's this possible?" thought Bakurio, but Shu suddenly interrupted his thoughts as he rushed with his staff at him at lightning speed while accumulating Hell's energy on it and smashing it at Bakurio's head, who quickly dodged by jumping backward. However, as the staff hit the ground, it was as if a meteor hit it and a terrifying crater was created in it that engulfed many devils and dogs that were fighting nearby. However, Bakurio noticed that the attack wasn't over yet thanks to his future sight as red light accumulated in the cracked ground before it rushed at him like a terrifying laser made of Hell's energy. "Let's see you surviving my Hell's smash," said Shu, who discarded his scholarly appearance and transformed into an unleashed beast. Bakurio snorted at him before he slashed at the air in front of him countless times, and those slashes magically hit the unsuspecting Shu, creating huge sparks on his armor and even creating a few injuries on his body. This was Void Slash. Then Bakurio disappeared just when the light made by Hell's Smash was about to hit him thanks to his blink ability and appeared right on top of Shu and used the third effect of his legendary sword, the End of the Path, which granted him another 100% increase to his attribute at the risk of consuming 10% of his health every second, but Bakurio didn't care since he was wearing his life necklace that recovered 5% of the damage he deals, so he was confident about lasting longer than his enemy. Void Slash. Bakurio used Void Slash at point blank just for its defense penetration property to increase the effectiveness of his slash, and he even coated it with his sharpest wind energy, although he didn't use sharp transformation. Nothing seemed to change about Shu's appearance, but Bakurio simply slashed again at an unseeable speed before he cleaned his sword from Shu's blood and started walking away from the guy. "Ha ha ha ha, you think you can harm my indestructible body? Stupid kid, daring to turn your back on me. Die!" yelled Shu, but suddenly, his whole body was cut into 2, before it turned into 4 and then 8 and then 16. "Impossible," said Shu as light faded from his eyes and the purifying formation hindered his ability to restore his body. "Now then, who wants to die next?" said Bakurio with an eerie smile as he absorbed Shu's soul before he turned his attention to the rest of the devil beasts, and before they could move, he used his still empowered state and used the second effect of his sword. Doom Slash. This skill created a terrifying fan-shaped dark slash that immediately killed 50 devil beasts of varying ranks that were still near the barrier before that slash entered the barrier and disappeared from view. What kind of strength is this? Muttered Kakashi as sweat slowly fell from the side of his face as he retrieved his hand that was covered with Chidori from the heart of a Jonin-level devil beast. Shoo! Yelled Hokusai as he also used his Hell's Fiend transformation and was about to rush at Bakurio, but Uebami appeared out of nowhere and stopped him before he dragged him away, leaving the rest of the devils behind to fend for themselves as they started fleeing from the beast-like human that appeared more of a devil than any of them, with his blood-red eyes thirsting for their blood. What kind of a monster is this? He actually slew all these devils on his own. Will he turn his sight on us soon? He seems to be thirsty for blood. Countless murmurs echoed from the ungrateful dogs who were fearful of Bakurio's primal show of strength and carnage, but he wasn't bothered by it because he knew that this was just how this world worked. The strong are always feared, especially when they are strangers, and other than the three sage dogs, no one else knew about Bakurio before his coming here. The three-headed hound sage, noticing this, immediately approached Bakurio and said gratefully, "Young man, thank you for helping us out. Even with you here, we still lost a few fighters. I can't imagine what would have happened without you." Hearing this, the other dogs slowly started getting over their fear and they began thanking Bakurio for his help as they tended to their wounds. Meanwhile, Bakurio didn't care at all about these dogs' views of him. Instead, he was focusing on a few notifications that appeared in front of him. Congratulations host. Your ability Yomi no Kuni has advanced into High Yomi no Kuni. Congratulations host. You have reached level 100. Your save and load ability has gained 2 more save points. Your inventory has expanded. You have unlocked the class system. Bakurio was intrigued by the new additions to his system, but he first had to deal with the current situation, so he said to the hellhound-looking dog from the myths, "You are welcome. Did such a huge invasion happen before?" "No, this is the first time such an invasion happened, although I know the guy that fought me. He's actually one of the snakes from Raichi Cave that entered hell when he was contesting for hegemony with the current white snake sage. I didn't expect to see him still alive," said the hound sage from its middle head while the other two kept observing the gate warily. Bakurio's eyes widened slightly and so did Kakashi's as he approached Bakurio and listened to their conversation along with Kuroinu and Shiroinu. "That guy seemed strong," said Bakurio, and the hound sage agreed. "Indeed, he could match me in terms of strength despite him not using the Hell's Fiend transformation," replied the hound sage with a hint of shock in his eyes. "Bakurio, are you alright?" asked Kakashi and received a nod from Bakurio as the latter said, "You should report this to Fugaku and Minato after we go back to Konoha." Kakashi nodded at him and kept staring at him with some fear in his heart. "How strong are you? You didn't even use your special eyes," thought Kakashi after remembering the way Bakurio went on a killing spree and dismantled the devil forces with only his sword in hand. "Now then, can you let us start the trial? I can't wait to learn your sage arts," said Bakurio, and the hound sage calmly nodded and said to Shiroinu, "Lead our friends to the testing area." "Yes sir," replied Shiroinu before she said gently, "Please follow me," and Bakurio and Kakashi immediately followed her, of course not before Bakurio stored all the bodies of those devils inside his inventory and collected all the items that dropped which only he could see. "Thank you again for helping us," said Shiroinu gratefully, and Bakurio simply smiled at her and said, "It's fine." While inside he thought, "My presence here was probably the reason such a thing happens in the first place. And they probably already guessed this. Yet they are still acting this friendly, so maybe befriending them isn't that bad." After walking for a while, they reached another mountain that was filled with all kinds of seals. This place is the Chamber of Discovery where the trial is going to take place. There are many rooms inside, so just pick one and close the door behind you and the test will automatically start, said Shiroinu gently before she went back to the gate of hell to stand guard just in case something else happens. "Don't you think they are being ungrateful?" asked Kakashi, all of a sudden surprising Bakurio as the latter replied curiously, "Why do you think so?" "I mean, you just basically saved their asses and they still ask you to go through some dumb trial," replied Kakashi with a lazy look, and Bakurio couldn't help but smile and say, "Well, to be fair, the situation wouldn't have developed this way if I wasn't here, but the other reason they still asked us to go through the trial is because usually, they aren't just to select people, they are also necessary to see if you have the talent to learn their sage arts or not. Otherwise you will end up transforming into a dog, or worse, die. I see, replied Kakashi, and they immediately entered a room each. Meanwhile, inside of hell, Uebami and Hokusai were currently kneeling right in front of Amatsu, and the latter said with a voice filled with emotions, "Your Highness, please take revenge on that bastard, he actually killed Shu and absorbed the souls of our soldiers." Amatsu stared at him for a while before she said, "I didn't expect him to be this strong. Not bad." Then she turned to Uebami and said, "Go to the room of life and use Shu's soul fragment to revive him through the King of Hell. You can choose who do you wish to revive as well, although it will take some time for their souls to recover." "Thank you, Your Highness," said Hokusai gratefully before he took his leave. He knew Shu ages ago and they both entered hell near the same time. Shu used to be a lion with a territory, and one day after a few humans tried to invade his territory and almost killed him, but a gate of hell appeared near him at the last second and he entered it without hesitation. Hokusai on the other hand used to be a ruler of an ancient country that was very proficient with the sword, but one day they had to fight with another country and some of his people decided to betray him when they thought they were going to lose, so he ended up entering hell seeking power to get revenge. As for Amatsu, no one knew of her origins, not even the oldest devils inside of hell. One day she just appeared out of nowhere and quickly climbed through the ranks until she gained absolute strength and become the undisputed ruler of hell. "Your Highness, what do you think of that kid's strength?" asked Uebami, and Amatsu simply snorted at him and said, "He's weaker than you, so why are you worried?" Uebami smiled awkwardly and responded, "I was just curious, I will go revive Shu for now," and then he took his leave. "Poop kid, being a toy to satisfy our master's boredom, he's nothing but a pitiful human," muttered Amatsu while gazing at Bakurio that just entered the trial before she got bored and went to soak in the water of hell. Outside of hell, Bakurio was currently inside the Chamber of Discovery, and the moment he entered it, all of his senses were gone. Smell, sight, touch, hearing, and taste. At this moment everything disappeared and he felt as if he had fallen into absolute darkness, and he almost couldn't stand properly since he couldn't even understand his current state. This state could drive normal people insane if they stay like this for too long, muttered Bakurio, although he didn't hear his voice, and in another room, Kakashi was going through the same thing. Then, something rushed out of the emptiness and hit Bakurio in the arm, and he realized that his sense of pain wasn't gone, or maybe it was only there because he was hit by a special object. "It seems like I should dodge the attacks in this state. Well, challenge accept," thought Bakurio with a faint smile different from Kakashi's panicked look as he kept getting hit time after time. "This test would have been useful if I went through it before going to the Eternal Chamber, since it could have helped develop future sight faster, but now I already have it and going through this trial is just a piece of cake for me," thought Bakurio as he instantly used future sight and dodged all attacks sent his way without any problems, and before long, the door of the chamber opened and a dog told him with an astonished look on its face that he passed the test and that he should wait for one of the sages to be back to teach him. Finding himself with nothing to do, Bakurio used his Byakugan to try and see what was happening with Kakashi, but he couldn't see anything. Surprisingly, their seals are so advanced to the point that they can block the Byakugan's ability to see through things, thought Bakurio in amazement before he went back near Hell's Gate and tried to use his Byakugan on the portal. But just as before, his vision couldn't pass through the barrier, and this time instead of getting blocked, it got completely distorted, making him feel nauseated instead. What about the Eye of Truth? Would be able to see through these things, thought Bakurio, and he immediately put it to the test. His Eyes of Truth were extremely hard to level up, and currently, it was only level 10, unlike his Byakugan which already reached level 100 during the past few months, in real-world time. Bakurio's vision suddenly turned completely still, and he started seeing a river of red energy coming from the portal to hell, and another river of natural energy getting absorbed by the portal. This portal appears to be using the natural energy in the air to power up its functions. Was it just a coincidence for it to be placed here in such a sacred ground that's rich in natural energy? Or was it intentional? Bakurio's eyes narrowed slightly before his gaze shifted into the portal and tried to see through it, and this time he succeeded. He saw a vast desolate land with terrifying and destructive weather. Hell flames raged on some places, hell's ice storms engulfed others, and all kinds of disastrous phenomena occurred. However, in spite of all this chaos, there was a palace standing firmly on top of a black mountain that resembled the Osor. mountain chain, and behind that palace was a huge king of hell, the same one that a Rinnegan user can summon through their Naraka path. However, different from just the head that the user of the Rinnegan can summon, this one here was the full body and it was huge, at least 30 meters tall, and its eyes weren't controlled by the Rinnegan. Instead he was sitting silently behind the palace inside a huge open hall with banners around him that had the word Judgment written on it. Currently, Uwabami was feeding it the souls of some of the people that died and they were slowly getting brought back to life thanks to the King of Hell's ability. This was a being born naturally from hell to oversee it, just like how the Death Reaper was born from the Pure Lands to oversee the dead. He's actually reviving those devils. Did they have some parts of their souls stored here? Sneaky bastards, thought Bakurio before he turned his attention to the palace and noticed that it was empty with only one woman inside it and she was having a bath in a pitch-black pool that was bubbling from time to time and gave him a chilling sensation. Who's this woman? Thought Bakurio, but suddenly, the woman stared in his direction and smiled faintly before moving her lips and Bakurio could understand what she said. Peeping isn't nice. Before her red eyes suddenly shined with a terrifying light and Bakurio felt as if his head was about to break apart as he felt a strong tug on his very soul. Uggghhh. He suddenly fell to the floor while holding his head, but he quickly cast recovery on himself and chugged down a health potion before he felt the pain weakening slightly. What was that ability? Bakurio felt as if his very soul was punched directly and almost got destroyed in the process, and if not for it being tempered by nature's energy multiple times from the different sage arts, he would have probably died right now. If my guess is correct, that woman is truly terrifying. I need to find a way to protect myself from these kinds of attacks in the future, muttered Bakurio before he stood up, and Shiroinu, who noticed what happened to him, quickly rushed to his side and helped him up. Are you okay, Bakurio-kun? I'm fine, it's just a backlash from using my previous power. He lied. You can go rest if you want in our living grounds, said Shiroinu with a worried look on her face, but Bakurio simply shook his head as he thought, how can I rest with such a being existing in the world? I'm okay, can I start learning sage arts? Shiroinu stared at him silently before she nodded and said, follow me, training our sage arts is a bit tricky. Meanwhile, inside of hell, Amatsu had an intrigued look on her face as she muttered, oh, how surprising, he actually survived that attack and he's already back on his feet. This kid is indeed not simple, but now is not the time to make our move. Our master's plan comes first. Then she closed her eyes silently inside the pool. This pool was a natural treasure that naturally combined hell's energy with nature's energy, and the longer she stays inside of it, the stronger she becomes. Back outside of hell, Bakurio spent the day learning the dog's sage arts from Shiroinu and Kuroinu that heavily relied on enhancing the senses, and before long, a notification appeared in front of him. Congratulations host, you learned Dog Sage Arts level 1. Each level increases the user's strength and agility by 7 points. Bakurio didn't care much about the increase in attributes. What he cared most about was the increase in his already incredible senses, and right now he could even feel people even with his eyes closed. You are truly a great genius, said the Hellhound Sage as he approached Bakurio, who just opened his eyes after completing his training. Thanks for the compliment, replied Bakurio calmly before he asked, is this the only reason you wanted to see me? Those devils' actions were out of our expectations. We didn't even think that they had that much power, and it worries me to think just how much they are still hiding. Bakurio glanced at the three-headed dog in front of him and couldn't help but say, it's wise of you to worry, but the situation is beyond your control, so you are simply wasting your time. I saw a little bit inside of hell with one of my abilities and I noticed that they could revive their own people. Impossible, said the Hound Sage with a startled look on all of his heads, but Bakurio simply shook his and said, I'm serious, this matter appears to be far more than what your tribe is capable of handling. I will see what I can do when I go back to the village. If all the devils we killed throughout our stay here decided to attack at the same time, this world would be doomed. Bakurio nodded in agreement, and remembering the terrifying aura of that woman, his mouth twitched slightly as he thought, this world is probably already doomed even if we don't include the rest of the devils. After informing the Hound Sage about the seriousness of the situation, Bakurio decided to make his way back to Konoha alone since he already achieved his goal and Kakashi seems to be going to take a while before he could pass the trial anyways. Finally, I'm free to check the changes to the system, thought Bakurio, and the first thing he did was to check what he got from killing that devil Shu whose power level already reached the ranks of super cages such as Madara and Hashirama, although this rank is also split into low, middle and high, and this guy was at the low level which is Kurama's level of power. Bakurio opened his quest tab and he immediately noticed 2 completed quests, Quest Ninja Killer, High Cage Kill 1 High Cage Level Ninja. Reward. 30,000 points, Summon Higher Undead Quest Ninja Killer, Low Super Cage Kill 1 Low Super Cage Ninja. Reward 60,000 points, Ring of the Ages, another undead skill, thought Bakurio as he remembered his skill. Summon Lesser Skeleton which he rarely uses because of how weak it was currently, but this skill might change his opinion on the usefulness of the skill. Summon Higher Undead Level 1. Allows the user to summon higher forms of undead by consuming multiple corpses. Level of power depends on the quality and quantity of the corpses. Ring of the Ages Level 130, Legendary. Type. Accessory. Description. A ring that was once worn by an immortal and was blessed by its own blood granting it life-prolonging effects. Function 1. Increases the host's HP recovery by 100%. Function 2. Increases the host's HP by 50%. Function 3. Defy the Ages. The longer the host keeps wearing this ring, the stronger its previous effects would get, plus 10% to F1 and plus 5% to F2 each year the host lives. This ring is truly a one-of-a-kind treasure. The longer you live, the stronger it gets. What kind of stupid item is this? Thought Bakurio, amazed by the incredible rewards of the system before he wore the ring without any hesitation and immediately felt as if his whole body was revitalized. What a great sensation, thought Bakurio as he made his way out of Kakashi's house and towards his own while checking his other rewards. I got many drops this time, and for some of them, it is my first time seeing them, thought Bakurio as he checked his now larger inventory. He got so many holy potions and holy scrolls as drops. The first item grants the weapon's holy attributes that increase the damage against evil creatures such as the devils, while the holy scrolls were single-use items that when ripped apart, would allow him to heal many people at the same time making them a great AoE healing spell. But this wasn't all because he also got many items. In fact, he got a whole set of armor called Devil Series that slightly resembled the armor Shu wore after his final transformation. And its effect was terrifying, not losing to any of his legendary items despite it only being a unique grade. But this is the magic of a set item. Bakurio decided against wearing it for now since it was too eye-catching and turned his attention to the last reward he got. They were 2 skill books. One of them was titled Battle Cry while the other was titled Poison Resistance. Skill books are extremely rare as drops and Bakurio almost never encounters them, so seeing 2 of them dropping now excited him slightly and immediately checked out these skills and was delighted by their effects. Battle Cry Level 1. When the host uses this skill, all allies' attributes in a 300 meters range would increase by 5% while his enemies' attributes are lowered by 5%. Poison Resistance Level 1. Grants the user increased resistance towards poisons of all kinds. Current increased 10%. This trip was truly worth it even without considering the learning of the dog's sage arts, which brings me closer to my goal. And I haven't even looked yet at the class system I got, thought Bakurio with a delighted look on his face as he made his way home. Meanwhile, back at the mountain of Osor, the Hound Sage was calmly contemplating some countermeasures for their grim-looking future when suddenly, the space rippled near him and a huge monkey walked out of it. Wisdom Sage, what are you doing here? Asked the middle head of the Hound Sage, and the Wisdom Sage calmly stared at the gate of hell before it responded. I saw what happened. The situation is turning quite serious and it soon will grow out of you power. That I know. I don't need your reminder, said the Hound Sage coldly, who wasn't pleased by the Wisdom Sage's actions at all. He's been watching all along and didn't make a move. What did that mean? How can he not be provoked when some of his own people died in the fight when they could have been saved? I know you are angry at me, but I couldn't interfere with that kid there. I wanted to see with my own eyes if he could shoulder the burdens his destiny is hiding, replied the Wisdom King with a sigh. How come you are mistrusting your eyes of wisdom? Asked the Hound Sage in surprise, and the Wisdom Sage only shook his head and said, after seeing how the Great Toad Sage easily lost his sight, I decided it was better to try and trust on the eyes that see the present rather than those that see the future, especially with how turbulent the river of time is being recently, and even the Black Tortoise Sage's abilities are being affected by it. So what brought you here then? Asked the Hound Sage, and the Wisdom Sage replied, you should know of our responsibility to the world as we are the creatures blessed by it. You took that responsibility by guarding the gate of hell, although you also have your own personal responsibilities tying you to it. Shut up. Don't talk about this in front of me or I will rip your head out, said the Hound Sage with a terrifying killing intent, something he didn't even direct at the devils, which made the Wisdom Sage frown slightly before he said, what I'm trying to say is that you are weak, although you are talented, but right now you are only using 2/3 of your potential. The Wisdom Sage pointed at the right head of the Hound Sage that had clear nature markings on it, and then he pointed at its middle head which had a terrifying amount of pure chakra concentrated on it. But then he pointed at its left head that didn't have anything special and said, you should know how strong you can be if you trained with hell's energy, and your body is naturally suited for it, yet just because of an order that no one remembers but you keep hindering your progress. For how long are you going to keep waiting? I said shut up you damn monkey, said the Hound Sage with a terrifying roar that shook the whole Osor mountain range and blasted his makeshift house into pieces, but the shockwave simply passed through the Wisdom Sage's body as if he wasn't there as he said, consider my words, the situation is far more urgent than you think, said the Wisdom Sage before he disappeared without a trace just like he appeared. The Hound Sage snorted slightly and turned his complicated gaze at the gate of hell before he averted his eyes once more. A promise is a promise, and even if his race forsakes everything, they will never forsake their loyalty and break their promises. I didn't expect this class system to work this way, thought Bakurio to himself as he reread the notifications related to the class system that appeared after he reached level 100. Congratulations host on unlocking the class system, calculating possible classes. Calculations complete. Host can choose from the following classes: ninja, monk, samurai, doctor, scientist, blacksmith. A long list of classes appeared in front of Bakurio, and he could choose any of them. Each class has its own benefits, such as an additional fixed amount of attributes that would be immediately added to them for each future level up, which are different from the usual 5 attribute points per level. There were also unique skills related to the classes. For example, picking the doctor class grants an additional increase to the effectiveness of all healing related skills. Blacksmith grants an increase in the success rate of a forging or upgrading process, and so on. Picking a fighting class like ninja or samurai can increase my strength, but the other classes are also not bad, plus I'm not sure if these are all the benefits I might get. After some contemplation, Bakurio decided to go with his gut instincts and chose the ninja class since this world revolves around them. The ninja class has been obtained successfully. Host has received the skill light footwork. Host has received the ability way of the ninja. For each level up above level 100, the host gets +1 points increase in strength, +2 in agility, +1 in stamina, +2 in spirit. Bakurio instantly felt a heat rush through his body as a notification appeared in front of him. Host current level is 108. You have gained +8 STR, 16 Agi, +8 Sta, +1 6 speed. Not bad, muttered Bakurio with a smile before he checked the description of the skills he gained. Light footwork level 1. Gain +2% increase to movement speed. Way of the ninja. +10% increase to the effects of all types of jutsu used by the host. I don't think these are the only benefits to be gained from classes. Further benefits are probably unlocked through leveling up or some other conditions, thought Bakurio, and decided to spend more time leveling up in the future. Meanwhile, as he was contemplating the benefits he gained from leveling up, in the Hokage's office, Kakashi's summon Pakun was currently delivering a message sent by Kakashi after finding himself stuck inside the trial. You said you have a message from Kakashi. Why isn't he here to deliver it himself? Asked Fugaku while staring at Pakun stoically. He's busy training and can't stop for now. You will understand when you read the message, replied Pakun before he gave Fugaku a scroll. If the situation is as troublesome as this dog is describing, could he really not stop his training to deliver the message himself? Thought Fugaku, finding the situation kind of weird as he picked up the scroll and started reading its content. However, the more he read, the more his expression darkened and he eventually slammed the table and stood up with an astonished look on his face. How could this be possible? What's wrong, Lord Fifth? Asked Shikaku, who was surprised by Fugaku's reaction. Fugaku didn't say anything and only pondered slightly before he gave the scroll to Shikaku and allowed him to read it for himself. Is this really true? Asked Shikaku with his hands trembling slightly and cold sweat falling from his forehead. Pakun nodded his small head reluctantly and said with a heavy look on his face, "We lost many of our brethren, and if not for Bakurio-kun eventually defeating that wave, we would have probably been annihilated. For such a huge danger to be kept at bay this long of a time, your tribe truly did this world a huge favor and sacrificed a lot," said Shikaku while letting out a sigh, and Pakun only nodded silently. "You said some of them were already at Super Cage level yet Bakurio was able to beat them?" asked Fugaku, and Pakun nodded before he described the fight to the two of them in further details, shocking them even further before Fugaku immediately turned to Shikaku and said, "Quick, send someone to summon Bakurio, I need to talk to him and hear his experience directly." Shikaku nodded at him and went to carry his order while Fugaku thought with a worried look, just what kind of entities this world is hiding, first Dark Chakra and now this. It didn't take long for Bakurio to get summoned to Fugaku's office, and he ended up going there reluctantly despite him wanting to have a rest from the craziness he just went through, especially the last attack from that woman that injured his soul. After entering the Hokage's office, he noticed that Tsunade and Hiruzen were also present, as well as Minato. According to Kushina, Minato has been missing from home a lot lately. "I wonder what he's doing," thought Bakurio as Fugaku immediately threw the scroll at him. "Is the content of this scroll true?" Bakurio took a seat and replied without even staring at it, "Yes, and it's probably even worse than what's written in the scroll." The mood in the room instantly got heavier after Bakurio uttered this, and Hiruzen couldn't help but ask with a worried look on his face, "Bakurio-kun, are these devils truly as strong as described?" The others waited patiently for a hopeful answer, but only despair awaited them as Bakurio truthfully replied, "They are extremely strong. Those at Jonin level can even resist a direct hit from the Rasengan and only got minor injuries. Plus they are extremely tough, but they seem weak against lightning since Chidori worked against them, although barely. Their regeneration's also a problem and they die only when both their brains and hearts are destroyed." Silence covered the room for a while before Tsunade asked what was on everyone's minds. "How strong are the devils of a higher level?" Bakurio recalled his fights with them as well as the stats he saw after repeatedly using his appraisal ability when he could, and after some contemplation, he said, "Beast and Demi-Beast devils has 50% and 100% increase to their defense respectively from the devil transformation. As for the humanoid beasts which are at the low cage level at least, they have a 150% increase. And the last ones who are almost completely human. I'm not sure. But it's not just 200% because they can also use a transformation called Hell's Fiend, which is similar to a Sage mode but uses Hell's energy instead, and it makes them extremely strong." Minato's eyes flickered slightly before he said, "Bakurio-kun, how strong do you think their strongest fighter is?" "Probably at mid or high super cage level like Madara and Hashirama," said Hiruzen with a sigh, but to his surprise and that of everyone else, Bakurio remained silent with a frown which brought a chill to their hearts. "Impossible, you don't think that?" Tsunade was shocked at the thought of facing someone stronger than even her grandpa, especially when she knew how terrorizing his power was. "Their strongest fighter. I only caught a glimpse of her and yet she almost killed me with just one look. Her power probably already surpassed the Super Cage realm, although I'm not sure by how much," said Bakurio with a sigh, making everyone feel a little bit helpless. "How are we supposed to deal with such a threat?" said Fugaku with a worried look, which was shared by everyone, but no one had a response to his question. However, they eventually ended up staring at Bakurio hoping this mysterious kid has an answer. "It's simple really, we just kill them," said Bakurio with an eerie grin as a terrifying aura of death gushed from him. "Soon he will become a sage of 6 paths, and he won't have any more equals in the world, or so he thought." After catching a glimpse of the power hidden in the depths of hell, Bakurio decided to hasten his plans, so he created multiple clones and focused solely on reaching level 100 in all of his sage arts. It took him a whole week to finish this task, and he was satisfied with the results. After he was done with this, he went to Hiruzen so that he can start his final trials to learn the monkey's sage arts. "Bakurio-kun, are you sure you want to go through with this trial? It's going to be hard," said Hiruzen, trying to advise Bakurio not to waste his time, but the latter simply shrugged and said, "You have an idea about the situation and the danger we are in. I need to finish this no matter what." Hearing this, Hiruzen let out a sigh before he nodded at Bakurio and said, I hope you succeed, before he summoned the Monkey King Enma to escort Bakurio to the Mountain of Flowers and Fruits. After Bakurio was reverse summoned to this sacred ground, he was hit by a sweet aroma in the air, and when he observed his surrounding, he noticed that just as it was described, this place was full of all kinds of flowers and fruit trees which made the soul relax just by staring at their ethereal beauty. What a wonderful place, muttered Bakurio, and Enma chuckled slightly at him and said, You are not here for a picnic, you can enjoy your time once you pass the trials, otherwise you can't stay here. Bakurio nodded at him and followed him to the location of the first trial, the trial of life and death that would be held by the Red Monkey tribe. I can't lead you any further from here, the Red Monkey King will take you to the location of the trial, said Enma as they reached a territory full of red houses, and not long after, a tall and thin red monkey approached them with an emotionless look on its eyes as he observed the two of them before he nodded at Enma and said to Bakurio, Follow me. Bakurio nodded at him and followed him silently, and before long, he was led to a statue of a monkey that had red eyes that appeared to be made of gems. Stare at the eyes of the statue, and the trial shall commence, said the Red Monkey King before he sat down to the side and observed Bakurio silently. He's completely different than Enma, is there a reason for this? Bakurio contemplated silently before he decided not to bother with such useless things. Enma said that this trial tests my survival abilities when I'm deprived of all of my power. This is no big deal for me, thought Bakurio before he fearlessly stared at the statue's eyes, which he guessed would probably put him inside a genjutsu for it to be possible. Just as Bakurio had guessed, the moment he stared at the statue's red gem-like eyes, he was immediately sent into a strong genjutsu where he felt as if he transformed into a mortal once more. His body was weak, he had no chakra, and even his thinking speed was slowed down. This is a terrifying genjutsu. It's at the level of Itachi's genjutsu, thought Bakurio as he observed the natural place he appeared in. It seemed as if he was in a forest and a voice suddenly whispered in his head. Survive for 1 week in the forest, well, this is going to be a walk in the park, Bakurio muttered confidently before he suddenly froze when he heard a terrifying roar coming from the sky above him. Roar! This roar caused the earth to vibrate and the clouds to part, which allowed Bakurio, whose eardrums were about to burst, to catch a glimpse of the creature behind this. It was a very huge red dragon that was at least 100 meters long, and it passed above him, casting a long shadow on the ground, making it appear as if night has fallen on that area. It seems like only my strength was taken. The creatures here are probably still strong. I need to be careful if I want to pass this trial, muttered Bakurio, completely ignoring the fact that he was overflowing with confidence not too long ago before he thought secretly to himself, as he always does, how come they know about dragons despite them not existing in the world outside? Is this genjutsu created based on my knowledge, or is there something more to this? Bakurio was truly confused, and he didn't want to voice this thought since he didn't know if those monkeys can observe what he was going through or not, just like how he never voices his true thought in the outside world in fear that the one responsible for the dark seed would hear him. I will confirm this when I go out, thought Bakurio before he started searching for a place to spend the night since he can't stay in the open like this. He would also need food and water to survive, and his hunter talent worked greatly in his favor in this kind of situation. Bakurio spent a few hours searching for a water source while avoiding any potential monsters, and thankfully the weather wasn't too hot so he wasn't dehydrated. Along the way, he collected a few items such as long tree branches and some vines, as well as some sharp rocks he found, and made some short spears so that he could defend himself with. I can hear the sound of water flowing, muttered Bakurio as he started walking in the direction he heard this sound, but he suddenly heard some rustling in the bushes, but it quickly disappeared. However, he was alert all the time and the sound didn't escape him, so he picked one of his makeshift spears and aimed it at the bush where the rustling came from and threw it with all of his strength. Thud! The sound of the spear hitting its target echoed, accompanied by a huge splash of blood before a beast howled in pain. Yuwu! This is a wolf, huh? Thought Bakurio before he remembered something very important about wolves. Wolves walk in groups, and they would go berserk if they smell the blood of their comrades the moment his memory gave birth to this thought. His survival instincts immediately kicked in and he started running in the opposite direction for tens of meters before he stopped and climbed a tree to hide in its leaves and observe his surroundings. Not long after, Multiple wolves started howling at the same time, which created even more howling throughout the area as they started scouting the area in search of the one that killed one of their herd. That was a close call, thought Bakurio, and he was about to let out a sigh of relief when suddenly, warning alarms started ringing inside his heart and he instinctively covered his weakest uncovered area, his neck. And just as he did, a completely brown snake that was disguising as a tree branch suddenly lunged at him right at the moment when he let his guard down, and despite his quick reaction, he was only able to avoid certain death and got bit in his forearm instead. Damn it, I didn't notice it at all, thought Bakurio before he quickly grabbed the snake by the area near its head and threw it away to where he heard the wolves were about to appear in the hope they would go after each other. Let's hope this thing wasn't poisoned, thought Bakurio before he quickly sucked all the blood in his wound just in case and spat it out before he tore a piece of his clothing and patched his hand with it. I need to pay much more attention inside this place, otherwise I will fail this trial. And this is just the first one. How hard are the other three? Bakurio finally began to understand why Hiruzen couldn't complete these trials despite him being an experienced ninja. They weren't meant for normal humans in the first place. Bakurio's first day was miserable inside the forest. Getting attacked left and right without any rest put a lot of pressure on both his body and his mind, but his heartless eyes never showed any distress despite his body that was riddled with wounds and filled with injuries. Finally, a place where I can rest, muttered Bakurio, who had just found a small cave hidden behind some bushes, and he barely squeezed himself inside of it and spent his first night there cold and alone. The next morning, he went out again in search of food, but this time he was attacked by a leopard which he didn't expect at all, and had to fight to the death to barely kill it since he didn't have any of his powers. TCH, the worst that appeared yesterday were some wolves, but now there are leopards as well. Is the difficulty going to get higher with each passing day? Bakurio couldn't help but frown when he remembered the huge dragon that flew above him yesterday and the long shadow it cast upon the earth, and he didn't even want to imagine fighting it even if he had all of his powers. No, this test shouldn't be that impossible, otherwise Hiruzen wouldn't have passed it. There's probably some sort of trick to it, thought Bakurio, completely confident that he was better than that old cowardly bag of bones as he started contemplating everything he went through since he arrived here. A test of life and death, testing survival ability. Is it really that straightforward? Thought Bakurio while walking through the forest to the location of the river he found yesterday to get some water, but not long after he sensed that some other beast was not far in front of him and immediately became fully alert. That dragon is probably the key to this, thought Bakurio as he suddenly had a very bold idea and changed the direction of where he was heading. His new destination was to march in the same direction as the huge dragon from yesterday, and according to what he saw from climbing a giant tree, that dragon was most likely headed toward a giant black mountain that was at least 5 kilometers tall. That's probably where the dragon is staying, thought Bakurio before he started walking through the forest while trying to evade any monsters along the way. At first, he only encountered normal animals, but soon he started finding huge versions of those animals such as huge snakes, huge tigers, and so on. And after that, he even saw weird animals like horses with upper humanoid halves and giant insects. This place is truly bizarre, he thought. 2 days later, Bakurio finally reached the foot of the mountain. However, it wasn't without a price, and he already lost a hand and a foot along the way. This journey was anything but easy. His hand was lost to a group of giant mantises that ambushed him, and his foot was eaten by a giant crocodile when he was crossing a marsh. I'm finally here, muttered Bakurio with a tired voice, and not long after, giant roars echoed from the peak of the mountain, scaring any animal from approaching. As I suspected, no beast dares to get too close to the mountain. The safest place is actually the most dangerous one, muttered Bakurio with a sigh before he leaned his back on the black mountain and closed his eyes. A day passed with him in that state before he recuperated slightly from his sleepless 2 days journey, and just as he suspected, no monsters approached him during that time, while the dragons probably saw him as something that wouldn't even fill the gap between their teeth, so they didn't even spare him a glance. I need some food and water, he muttered before he started limping along the perimeter of the mountain in search for what he desired. After a few hours, he found a source of water and he immediately drank his fill before he began searching for some small prey he could hunt in his current state. Time quickly passed under the safety of the mountain, and Bakurio barely managed to survive for 7 days, although he was both starved and thirsty since he wasn't always able to get food and water with his injuries. Ellipsis. Back at the mountain of flowers and fruits, the Red Monkey King kept staring at Bakurio with its cold eyes. In the real world, only a day had passed, and he was surprised to see that Bakurio was able to pass their trial from the first try. After all, Hiruzen probably spent 100 tries before he found the trick to it. Bakurio's closed eyes quivered slightly before they opened and he stared curiously at his surroundings, seeing that he was back in the real world, and he was immediately hit by a strong sense of hunger, so he turned to the Red Monkey King and the latter said before he could even ask, "Congratulations on passing the first test. Follow me, I have some food prepared for you." "Oh, how considerate of you," said Bakurio with a smile as if he didn't suffer for a whole week, which surprised the Red Monkey King slightly. "My name is Shuma," said the Monkey King. This was him showing that he acknowledged the young man in front of him, and Bakurio nodded at him. "I'm Bakurio Uchiha. Can you please answer a question for me?" The Red Monkey King nodded at him calmly, and Bakurio immediately asked, "That genjutsu I was in, was it based on a real place?" The Red Monkey King suddenly paused in his steps and stared at Bakurio deeply before he let out a sigh and said, "You are the second person to realize this. Oh, so my guess was true. Who was the first?" asked Bakurio curiously, and Shuma calmly replied, "According to my knowledge, it's the Sage of Six Paths. Our Red Monkey Sage said that he realized this because of his Rinnegan that has ties to that world. I guess you realized this as well from your connection to him as his descendant. That place is connected to the Rinnegan." Bakurio's eyes widened slightly as he asked, "What's the name of that place?" Shuma stared at the empty space slightly with a regretful look before he said, "That place is the Beast World, a separate dimension from this world." Bakurio suddenly recalled his countless fights with pain during his war timeline and the various beasts that he could summon thanks to his Rinnegan, and suddenly he was hit by realization. The animal path probably summoned those animals from the Beast World, huh? I wonder if those dragons still exist there. Now that I think about it, many places here seem to be related to the dragons: the Dragon Palace, Raichi Cave, Dragon Ground Cave. It's highly possible that these sage animals came from that world far back in the past. Bakurio decided to ask Katsuyu about this later, since she would probably be more open to him than the other sages, and tell him the truth, and ended up following silently after Shuma, who offered him some food that consisted of some fruits and juices that tasted so heavenly delicious. "Once you finish, I will escort you to the location of your next trial that would be held by the long-armed monkeys," said Shuma coldly as he sat to the side. Bakurio nodded at him and filled his stomach to the brim before they left to start the second trial, the trial of will. "Welcome, young man. I'm Kuma, the king of the long-armed monkey tribe," said a tall and very muscular monkey just like Enma, but his fur was completely white and his hands reached all the way to his feet. "Nice to meet you, Kuma. I'm ready to start the test," said Bakurio, and Kuma chuckled slightly at him and said, "Not much for words, huh? You remind me of someone." He shot a look at Shuma, who stared at him coldly before he said, "My job here is done," and then he left. "Tch, what a cold guy," muttered Kuma before he said to Bakurio, "Our trial tests the will of the individual and how far they can persevere. Follow me to the foot of the mountain." Bakurio nodded at him and followed him to the foot of the mountain before Kuma suddenly said to him, "Wear this bracelet. It will restrict your physical attributes, turning them into that of a normal human, and it will also shrink you down to 1/10 of your current size." Bakurio stared silently at the bracelet before he wore it, and a huge rush of nature's energy rushed into the bracelet as various seals started gushing from it, and Kuma's eyes couldn't help but widen as he thought, "This kid is a monster. I can't wait to see if he could pass this test." In just a few seconds, Bakurio found himself covered in countless seals, and thanks to his understanding of them as well as his talent, he was able to deduce that they were for the purpose of restricting his strength and chakra as well as shrinking the size of the user. However, he also noticed that there were some sneaky seals that had the purpose of confusing the user, which made him narrow his eyes slightly. This seal far surpasses the one Minato used to seal Kurama. Whoever came up with it is a terrifying being, thought Bakurio as he started feeling a terrible weakness covering his whole body that started shrinking in size until it became 1/10 of its original size. "Now then, young man, your challenge starts now. Climb the mountain of flowers and fruits all the way to its peak and you shall pass the test, said Kuma with a smile before he disappeared into the distance. Too bad for you, this bracelet of yours can't block my abilities like the previous genjutsu, and I can see that a huge part of this test is from the confusion seals which were resisted by my reinforced heart and my eyes, thought Bakurio as he stared at the flowers that now become taller than him and started making his way up the mountain. This mountain was only 1 kilometer tall, but to the now shrunken Bakurio, it was as if he was standing in front of a mountain that was 10 kilometers tall. However, he wasn't discouraged by this and started making his way slowly up the mountain. Along this journey, he kept constantly getting attacked by many insects and animals which he usually thought of as insignificant, but now they posed a huge threat to him. Was the first test done on purpose so that people can be ready for this one? It seems I wasn't wrong to think that these sneaky monkeys won't make it a simple climbing test, thought Bakurio coldly. He noticed that the higher he climbed, the stronger the animals he was facing grew, as well as the feeling of confusion he felt grew stronger as well, but he was still able to resist it. However, things changed slightly when he reached the 1 kilometer mark as an army of ants that were as big as him suddenly attacked him and they seemed attracted to him for some reason as he was clearly their target since they followed him even when he hid or tried to avoid them. This is definitely the doing of this bracelet, thought Bakurio while glaring at the bracelet on his right wrist. Meanwhile, the Monkey King Kuma was chuckling to himself as he observed Bakurio struggling to fend off the ants. You made a mistake coming out too early from the first trial. You were indeed smart to figure it out, but you missed on a lot of experience that you could have learned, young man, he muttered to himself, but his eyes soon widened in surprise as a beautiful but eerie dark sword appeared on Bakurio's hand and he started chopping every ant that approached him with surgical precision. How in the name of Sage did this kid come up with such an item that fit his small size, muttered Kuma in surprise, not understanding the magic of the system items that could always fit to Bakurio's size. However, he didn't move from his place to interfere since using weapons was allowed. Meanwhile, after killing almost 100 ants, Bakurio ended up panting slightly and couldn't help but take a rest as he lay there on the ground surrounded by piles of ant corpses. These monkeys are weird, they act straightforward but they are far from that, and I can already conclude that this journey will only keep getting more and more difficult the higher I get. After staring at the pitiful experience he gained from these level 4 ants, Bakurio recovered his strength quickly before he started making his way up the mountain again. He noticed a pattern appearing along his climb. Every 1 kilometer, the confusion would rise a notch and he would face a strong animal attack. At the 2nd km mark, he was attacked by bees from the air trying to poke him. At the 3rd km mark, it was a mixture of bees and ants. At the 4th km mark, it was a bunch of worms that would split into more worms when he cuts them and they were the most frustrating enemy he faced so far, and his only thought when facing them was that it would have been much more easier if he could have burned them with some ninjutsu. At the 5th km mark, things finally took a turn for the worse as he was attacked by mantises, and he couldn't help but remember the right hand he lost inside the beast world and tightened his grip on his sword. After all, just because Bakurio hides his pain very well it doesn't mean that he didn't feel any. The experiences he went through inside that genjutsu were far from fun after all. This is going to be a tough one, he thought as he started fighting with the mantises. This was the closest fight so far and he barely won it with a few superficial injuries here and there on his body. Phew, that was close, muttered Bakurio as he took a rest and continued his climb. His body was already extremely tired and he felt as if something was trying to influence him to make him give up but it was resisted continuously. At the 6th km mark, Bakurio was expecting another fight, but instead, he found himself facing so many giant dung beetles that were rolling giant rocks that they immediately threw in his direction. This is fucked up, muttered Bakurio while staring at the huge rocks rolling at him from multiple directions and even changing after colliding with each other, making them hard to predict or dodge, so he instantly used his multitask ability and quick thinking speed to calculate their trajectories. Kuma was surprised to see Bakurio walking forward calmly and the rocks seemed to be avoiding him on purpose as they always pass close to him but never hit him. No, this kid is making very small adjustments to his speed and movement, just enough to dodge the rocks. He's actually predicting their movement perfectly. What a monster, thought Kuma while recalling how Hiruzen managed to go through this place. Hiruzen actually hid inside a hole until the barrage of rocks ended. After the avalanche of rocks ended, the dung beetles quickly ran away unwilling to fight as if they knew the fate that awaited them, and Bakurio simply ignored them and continued on his way since he didn't spend too much energy here. Finally, the 7th km mark. I'm already 70% of the way muttered Bakurio, but he was surprised when he wasn't attacked and the whole place seemed kind of peaceful, which only further increased his wariness as his inner alarms started ringing. There's something weird about this place, thought Bakurio as he observed his surroundings closely before his eyes caught sight of something, and just as he did, he immediately jumped out of the way. Swoosh! A giant green snake that was hiding on a big plant jumped at Bakurio with its mouth wide open, wanting to swallow him whole, and if not for his quick reaction speed, that would have been the outcome. That was close, but I'm not the type of person to fall for the same trick twice, thought Bakurio as he readied his sword and faced the huge snake that was at least twice his size fearlessly. Come, he said with eerily calm eyes. The green snake hissed at him before it jumped at him again. Bakurio watched everything in slow motion now that he had his abilities and put his sword in an quick draw stance and waited for the last second when the snake's head was just a hand distance from him before he leaned to the right, dodging its lunge, and drew his sword instantly before he returned it to its sheath. Then, without even staring behind him, he continued his way to the top of the mountain as a clean cut appeared on the snake's body before its head slowly slid from it while its body kept spasming on the ground before all life left it. Bakurio continued his climb through the mountain of fruits and flowers while thinking, there's definitely something more to this test, the question is, when is it going to happen instead of if it will happen. At the 80% mark, Bakurio was attacked once more by many gigantic animals, but his fighting mastery proved to be too great and allowed him to survive through the onslaught, all the while resisting the power that was trying to confuse his mind. Although he was still injured despite all of his efforts as well as exhausted. After reaching the 90% mark, Bakurio encountered a statue this time. It appeared to be from the long-armed monkey tribe, and it was extremely huge compared to Bakurio's current size, and it reminded him of the one that used that strong genjutsu on him and sent him to the beast world. This time, however, the statue had gem-like fingernails and it spoke from its mouth and said, only a monkey could climb any further. Then Bakurio felt a strong pressure weighing on his body and did not allow him to move any further up. Is this supposed to be a verbal test? He thought before he said with a smirk, can you not be racist? However, that didn't garner any reaction from the statue other than an increase in the pressure it was emanating. Well, I'm no monkey, but I still desire to climb this mountain, said Bakurio. However, just as before, he only felt the pressure on his body increasing and he was already barely able to stand. This is not good, I need to quickly figure out a proper answer, thought Bakurio as he started scanning his surroundings for any clues, but there was nothing out of place. The wind blew gently, the sun shined brightly, and the animals each went through their lives as normally while following the laws of nature. That's right, the animals. Bakurio suddenly noticed that some of the animals and the insects were moving around freely even past the 90% mark, yet they weren't hindered by the statue. There's definitely a reason for this. What does all these animals have in common with the monkeys? There's definitely a clue somewhere. Don't tell me. Bakurio was suddenly hit by a sudden realization as he observed the animals around him and what happened right after the end of the first trial before he said with a smile, I'm not a monkey, but I also enjoy the fruits and flowers this mountain has to offer. Right after Bakurio said this, the pressure disappeared and the statue spoke. You may pass. As I suspected, the name of this sacred ground as well as the fact that Shuma invited me to a feast right after I finished my first trial are both hints just for this moment, thought Bakurio, surprised by how well planned these trials were. I wonder what I will find on the peak of this mountain, muttered Bakurio as he continued his climb warily, but he was surprised when he didn't encounter any further dangers and his journey was pretty much smooth sailing all the way to the top. And just like that, he reached the peak of the mountain of flowers and fruits. However, different from the beautiful scenery he was expecting, the peak of this mountain was completely barren, with no beauty in sight. In fact, it simply felt empty. Bakurio's eyes widened slightly as he stared at this scene. His hardships led him to an annoying feeling made its way to his heart as Kuma suddenly appeared near him and chanted something, causing the bracelet to leave Bakurio's hand and his body slowly returned back to normal. However, he still didn't move from his position and simply stared at the land underneath him in confusion. Seeing this, Kuma cheerfully said, Congratulations on passing the second trial. The trial of will. Who designed this trial? Bakurio interrupted him coldly, but Kuma's cheerful expression didn't waver at all. The trials were designed in a collaboration by the four great wise sages. Then he walked beside Bakurio and stared at what he was staring at before he said, "Unlike what people might think, the top of the mountain has no hardships, in fact, it has nothing. This is a reminder to those that go through it. Sometimes, the struggles are far more important than reaching the goal, because once you do reach it, there will only be emptiness left. That I know very well. Take me to the next trial," said Bakurio coldly, not wanting to discuss this any further, and Kuma couldn't help but think. It seems like this trial hit a nerve on this kid's heart. Before he said, "Follow me, the next trial is the trial of the self, and it would be conducted by the four-eared monkey tribe." Bakurio nodded at him and followed him back down from the mountain, unaware that the statue he just encountered was observing him silently and relaying his results to the other statues. Kuma led Bakurio to the four-eared monkey king Renma. He appeared to be calm, but not the antisocial type like Shuma. He had 4 ears and glowing yellow eyes that overflowed with a magical feeling. This guy is a sage, a perfect one at that, thought Bakurio as he observed Renma silently. In these sacred grounds, many animals study sage arts, especially since their bodies are suited for it. But even then, not many can truly master them since they don't have enough control or talent. So, most of them ends up in half-sage states like Jiraiya and his teachers. However, this Renma in front of him was actually a perfect sage. Meaning that these monkeys has at least 5 perfect sages. The biggest number he has encountered in one sacred ground. "Follow me," said Renma before he led Bakurio to a hall with only one statue inside that had 4 gem-like ears. "Are you ready?" he asked Bakurio, and the latter calmly nodded at him, and right after, the statue's ears started rattling slightly, creating a vibration that passed over Bakurio's body and resonated with him. Then, out of nowhere, a splitting image of himself appeared in front of him as a voice echoed from the statue's mouth. "No weapons or Kekkei Genkai allowed." Bakurio, who was about to retrieve his legendary sword, ended up stopping mid-action as he glared at the clone that appeared in front of him, as well as the countless seals covering the hall before he rushed at his clone, and it moved at the same time as him. He actually has future Sai. Bakurio was surprised by how perfect this imitation was, and when they clashed, he felt as if he collided with a rock. Strong. Is this really not a genjutsu? Bakurio was confused as he kept clashing with his clone, but he couldn't gain the upper hand no matter what he tried to do. In fact, he was slowly losing it. This fight went on for a whole day before Bakurio stopped while panting, and so was his clone. How's this possible? How can they mimic everything, even my talents? This clone is actually getting stronger at a slightly faster rate than me as well. Ellipsis. Meanwhile, as Yuki was contemplating the weirdness of what was happening, a giant stone hidden inside the very center of the mountain of flowers and fruits was shining with a multicolored light that reflected Bakurio's image like a holograph. This was the Sky Stone, the rarest treasure of the monkey clan, as well as a treasure that made it possible to manipulate the advanced forms of the yin and yang, reality and life transformations, which is why they were able to create this trial. This is a power that anyone would desire, and if it ever lands in evil hands, the results would be disastrous. Thankfully, the monkeys were wise enough to avoid such a tragedy. Meanwhile, Bakurio was currently contemplating on how to surpass himself. However, such a question was never easy to answer. Thank you for listening, guys. See you in the next part.